Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
The Education Secretary says that schools need to stop teaching activist propaganda. Farmers are told to clean up their language. And an academic tells the Oxford Union that eating meat is racist. This is Free Speech Nation. I always knew I wasn't really cut out for teaching. In my first ever lesson, a boy put his hand up and said to me, Sir, I've got a nosebleed. And I just said the first thing that came into my head, which was, oh, too much Coke. Which, you know, it was a joke, obviously, but not one that endeared me to the senior management. I think teaching, actually, is one of the most important things that anyone can do with their lives. But to be a good teacher, it has to be a vocation. The best teachers are so devoted to their charges that they spend most of their free time preparing and marking and gearing up for the next week of classes. It's a very stressful job. That's why most of the teachers I know are functioning alcoholics. But there's another breed of teacher who goes into the profession for all the wrong reasons, because it provides an opportunity to hold a position of authority, to guarantee a captive audience. And you can even convert kids to your way of thinking. Take a look at this.
I teach my elementary school students about gender identity. Learning about gender identity helps children develop critical social-emotional skills such as self-awareness, social awareness, and respect. I teach my students that there's a whole spectrum of gender identities and that everyone, whatever their gender, deserves love and respect.
And there are so many of these clips online with teachers on TikTok talking about how they've come out to their students as polysexual or abrosexual or pangender or demigender or whatever gender identity has been invented that week. And of course, all of this is ideological in nature. It is akin to a religious belief. By all means, we should be able to talk about these new cultural developments. But teaching ideological belief systems to children as though they are uncontested fact is actually against the law. And telling pupils to use they and them as singular pronouns isn't going to go down too well when they end up failing their English exams. Of course, you're probably thinking, well, you know, all of this stuff, it's just going on in America. This is a country where, according to a recent survey, 30% of the population pronounce meme as mimi. Not making that up. I mean, they can't even spell colour or drive-through. They don't know what crisps are. Americans are basically savages. But we shouldn't get cocky. Because us Brits, we tend to import our trends from America. So things that were fashionable over here, they started out as being fashionable over in America. Just think of rock music, or baseball caps, or childhood obesity. And it will be the same with the politicisation of the classroom. Take a look at this.
What are the different gender identities?
That's a really, really exciting question to ask. Do you know there are so many gender identities? So we know we've got male and female, but there are over 100, if not more, gender identities now. So we know that some people might feel like they're two different genders. So people might think they're bi-gender. And then you've got some people who might call themselves genderqueer, who are just like, I don't really want to be anything in particular. I'm just going to be me.
So that's from the BBC. So we can't really say that this is just an American problem. And now the Education Secretary, Nadhim Zahawi, has said that the government will issue new rules to ensure that teachers are not indoctrinating children at schools. This comes after Brighton Council recently attempted to implement critical race theory through their anti-racist school strategy. In documents that were leaked to the press, it was discovered that children as young as 7 would be taught that they were not racially innocent. In other words, children who had once been told that treating people differently on the basis of skin colour was morally wrong are now being encouraged to see everything through the prism of race. This means that the achievements of social liberalism and the civil rights movements are being unravelled in the name of anti-racism. The skewed rationale of critical race theory has left us in a position whereby a mixed-race child could be encouraged to perceive one parent as the oppressor and the other as the oppressed. And what is the logical endpoint of all this? Segregation. You had the prestigious Brentwood School in California. They went so far as to arrange racially segregated dialogue sessions with parents and teachers. And in the American School in London, which is the most expensive day school in the UK, organised after-school activities in which children were separated by race. Now, from a strategic point of view, of course, it does make complete sense to indoctrinate children at an early age. Schopenhauer was almost certainly right when he wrote, "There is no absurdity so palpable that it may be firmly planted in the human head if only you begin to inculcate it before the age of 5. And this accounts for the sudden proliferation of what they call woke children's books, presumably intended to produce a whole new generation of activists. Who Are You? The Kid's Guide to Gender Identity. That's aimed at 3-year-olds and over. That takes readers through a multiplicity of fashionable new identities, such as genderqueer, non-binary, and two-spirit. Other recent examples would include feminist baby, or anti-racist baby. And we've also got this one, A is for activist. Now, I have to emphasise, I'm really not saying that we should ban all mention of these things in schools. Quite the reverse. I think gender identity ideology and critical race theory are two offshoots of a new identity-obsessed religion that is capturing our major educational and political institutions, as well as, of course, the corporate world and the managerial class. So it is probably quite important that children know about it and that we have discussions with them about these various ideas that are becoming so common among the powerful in society. But what we shouldn't do is teach children that they are grounded in fact. In a liberal society, people are free to identify however they wish, but they can't force others to share their beliefs. I don't have a gender identity. I don't believe such a thing exists. But I'm happy for others to believe it. It's none of my business. Likewise, if you believe in the tenets of critical race theory, that society is dominated by a system of power known as whiteness, and that all human interaction is underpinned by racism, that's fine, that's up to you, that's your belief. I don't think it's true, and I don't think teaching children that it's true is really justifiable. I'm continually being contacted by teachers who are being forced to sit through training sessions about white privilege or unconscious bias or gender identity, and they're all too afraid to register an objection. And up until now, the government has done very little to address the problem. Maybe now that the institutional power of Stonewall is slipping away and people are waking up to just how divisive and regressive critical race theory can be when implemented in society, more of us might be prepared to take a stand. But until that happens, let's just leave the kids alone. Now, joining me for the next 2 hours on GB News Live and on TV, on digital radio, I've got Lewis Schaefer and Leo Kurz. Let's give a round of applause to Leo. Now, look, and Lewis was meant to be there. I think 1 out of 2 panellists showing up isn't bad. I mean, you know, it's a 50% hit rate. I mean, the weather's bad outside and he's very slovenly.
Yes.
Why is he late? What's going on?
I don't. The tubes. I don't know if this is a sign of London's demise, but the tubes just aren't running. I had to drive here.
You had to drive?
Yeah, in a car.
I thought. Yeah, I assumed it wasn't a penny farthing. Well, poor Lewis. Well, we'll get to Lewis in a moment. And it's such a shame because I went through an effort for Valentine's Day to sort of spruce up the set. I was going to give him that.
It's quite wilted. Has that been in a microwave? It's not even Valentine's Day.
We've had it since the last Valentine's Day, probably. But anyway, that's the producer trying to spruce things up. Anyway, so do you have any thoughts about this idea of the way in which activists are getting into schools now, Leo? Because so the National Education Union, so the biggest teachers' union, recently said that it needed more activists in schools, and I sort of think the opposite. I respect anyone's right to have those opinions and those ideologies and to explore them and to support them, but to say to kids this is true. It's like me going and saying, like, the Baal is true, the Canaan fertility god is real, and you must believe it. And I sort of think that's not right.
No, I'm really worried about the bias in schools, because it seems that only sort of Guardian reading, progressive, woke liberals become teachers, because intelligent right-wing people get better jobs.
Yeah.
So I think we need to redress this, and I think some people need to quit their good jobs as productive members of society and join the indoctrination of children.
All right, well done, Leo. What a typically contrarian point of view. Listen, we do have, I'm being told now, we do have Lewis Schaefer here, so shall we introduce him? Why not? OK, it's the attention he craved. Lewis Schaefer, everyone. So, look, I know what this is about, Lewis. You just wanted to be fashionably late because you wanted the round of applause, you wanted the attention. That's all this is.
No, I was flying in from DC, and they had to cancel the flight.
I don't believe you for 1 second. You're just trying to... You're trying to imply that you're international, like...
Well, Hammersmith and City wasn't working.
No, OK, that's more likely. I thought you might be, though, because you're in all these films these days. You do all these Hollywood... He actually does these Hollywood movies. Like, you were in Wonder Woman 2.
Wonder Woman 2.
Yeah.
I was in... I'm going to be in Fantastic Beasts. I'm going to be in one with Tandy Newton.
I mean, what's going on? Why are you successful all of a sudden?
They just haven't found out about me.
Oh, well, thanks. You know, soon you won't be on this show anymore because you'll think it's beneath you, right?
Beneath me, or you'll fire me for being late. It's an outrage.
Well, there's that, potentially that. Listen, I want to go to the audience now because there's lots of questions to get through tonight. So the first question we've got is from Janet. Where is Janet? Hi, Janet.
Hi. Yeah, I want to ask, while we're on this sort of area, do we find the Japanese flag offensive?
Well, now, the Japanese flag, I think it's quite a bland flag because it's just a white background with a red spot. It's not very elaborate, you know, we could do more with that. But I think this is specifically about this pub in Scotland, so I am going to come to Leo about this. It's because they put out a Japanese flag. It was actually a really nice gesture because there are now I'm not a football fan, but apparently there are now 4 Japanese players in the Celtics. Is that what you call them?
Celtic.
Yeah, Celtic, yeah. Sorry. You see, I told you I know nothing about football. But so they put up this Japanese flag at this pub called the Cross Keys in Wishaw. Now, that strikes me as quite a nice gesture, but apparently people have said that this is offensive and anti-British because during the war, Japan was at war with Britain. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, and apparently Japan treated some British prisoners of war quite badly. So some elderly men in this village or this town were upset. But I don't believe it because nobody in Scotland is old enough to have served in the Gulf War. Never mind World War II. Everybody dies in their sort of early 30s, and so. No, so you don't think it's direct experience? Look, I get it. If you were in a prisoner of war camp in Japan during the war, and you had torture and all the rest of it. Yeah. Maybe you have reasons for reacting in this way. But like you said, I don't believe anyone has there, really, surely. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if it's just the case of like one person, has watched Bridge on the River Kwai and decides to get upset by proxy, or if they thought it was a new gender. That was, being hung above the pub. But
it could well be that there are flags for every gender now.
Yeah.
So the flags are infinite now.
Yeah.
And there's that guy Ollie London who identifies as Korean. Yeah. So he probably uses a Korean flag. So
he identifies as South Korean. So
is that right?
Yeah. So he can still have 3 meals a day.
Well, what do you think, Lewis? Because this, to me, I just see this and I think, look, they were trying to be nice, weren't they? This was a nice thing.
It's not even the Japanese flag from that period. It's not the Emperor's flag. It's a brand new flag, that flag.
So they're just historically inaccurate as well.
Yes, and so it's not they're putting up the flag that reminded them of the bridge in the River Kwai. But the thing that's amazing is, like, this country has had symbols of the Germans, like, pushed in our faces for hundreds of years with the Queen. You think of her.
You think of the royal family as being a German symbol.
The Germans in World War II.
Well, of course, the royal family changed their name to Windsor to avoid the associations. Yeah. But you're still bringing it up. You won't let it go, Lewis.
Well, you know what? They actually planned the bombing to bomb the cast of whatever it is, Windsor.
Is this a conspiracy theory, Lewis?
You know what? Why not?
Yeah, OK, well, let's not entertain that too long before we start getting
I don't think they understood where I was going with it.
No, I'm grateful for that. But I think this is it strikes me as obviously the Japanese flag doesn't just represent the people who participated in torture during the war. It's about a nation, and it's about people from that nation. It seems like a sweet thing to do, personally, but, you know. What do I know? I'm not Scottish, so I don't have that
Or the
kind
people
of...
who destroyed our economy in the 1960s.
What, for being too good?
For being too good,
Yeah.
you know? You could associate a lot of bad things.
And there was Pearl Harbor as well. I mean, 'cause that was one of the worst things that had happened in America until the Capitol riots last year.
Right.
That's right. Oh, that was worse, wasn't it?
Well, according to Kamala.
I mean, Kamala, but Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah.
I mean, they were talking about, they had that commemorative day on the 6th of January, and they're saying that this was another Pearl Harbor, another 9/11. I'm thinking, no, it was a couple of guys in horns nicking a table.
Yeah, it was a stag do. A stag do that got out of hand.
It wasn't quite the same thing. I mean,
And
do you still feel bad about Pearl Harbor?
Well, I think the Japanese handled it right because they never apologized.
They didn't apologize.
And that's the way you got to be. You got to be in this day and age. You can't apologize for anything. If they had
Exactly. People are going to be cancelling the Japanese over Pearl Harbor. Is that what you're saying?
if they had apologized.
If they had. Well, let's move on. We've got another question here from Michael, who is a barrister. And this is appropriate. Michael, this is a barrister question, apparently. We've got coming from you.
Does it involve Starbucks?
No, it does not involve... Wait for the question, Lewis. Don't
Sorry.
anticipate.
So, are barristers' wigs culturally insensitive?
Now, no, this is an interesting one. This was a story this week. The comments came from this QC called Leslie Thomas, and he said, you know, the wigs that they wear in the court, and it's sort of... They're like periwigs, aren't they? Sort of the old white curly wig things. He said they were fashioned for Caucasian hair. They look ridiculous on black people. Michael Etienne, who's one of Thomas's colleagues, he has an afro, and he said that he's been told he'd be in contempt of court if he doesn't wear a wig. So, has he got a point, Leo? I mean...
Yeah, I mean, well, he's saying they look ridiculous on black people, but they look ridiculous on white people as well. It's the most ridiculous-looking thing I've ever seen in my life.
Do we know what they're for? Michael, do you know what they're for? Like, what is the purpose of the wig to make every... Because you're a barrister. I'm putting you on the spot now, sorry. But is it the case that it's to make barristers and legal people all look neutral, I suppose? And no?
Yeah, keep it uniform.
Keep it all uniform, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's the idea. I mean, Lewis, do you think that's unfair? If you've got an afro, if you've got a sort of...
Yeah.
Particularly like a 70s style big afro.
You mean bring, instead of that wig, put an afro wig on?
No, well, we could just make everyone wear afro wig. That would be,
that would be nice too. Maybe that would be fair. As you see those tiny little wigs, you have to basically have a shrunken head in order.
They're very small, aren't they?
They're very small.
Yeah.
And I think it's sort of unfair. I know why you're concerned about it, but...
Why are you concerned about it? Because he doesn't have hair.
I didn't mean it that way, but for someone like me, who's got magnificent George Clooney-like hair, you know, I wouldn't want to put any kind of wig on.
Yeah, but this isn't to do with that. It's to do with the idea of... Look, well, you can all agree the wig looks silly, and we wouldn't want to cover your beautiful locks.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it's this idea that actually it's racially insensitive because if you have a certain haircut, that it just doesn't work. I mean, surely that should be taken into...
Well, it's along the lines of... I didn't listen to your question.
OK.
But,
this is so typical.
But it's along the lines of the Jewish yarmulke, which was a hat to cover the heads in the height of, you know, it's hot down there in Israel, right? And whatever you call Palestine. And I want to be careful.
You're being balanced.
Exactly. And it's hot down there, so you need a hat. But slowly, over time, they got a little embarrassed as to how lazy, you know, how small.
And so they made it smaller. Is that what happened?
I don't know if that's the reason.
I mean, the problem with having Lewis on is that I never know whether he's just making stuff up. I have him on as an authority.
Yeah.
And you're
and late too.
Late. Talking nonsense.
Shouldn't he know? I mean, he's
a barrister. But you shouldn't put someone on the spot because they're a barrister.
Ask him how much it costs. That's the most.
But I presume the wigs are given out free.
No,
right?
they're not.
No? Neither confirm and deny.
Okay.
No. I think
fair enough.
We're
going to go on to another question now. This is a question we've got from Barry. So where's Barry? Hello, Barry. How are you?
Yeah. Is eating meat racist?
Now, Barry sounds a bit mad at this point. But there's a reason for the question. So is eating meat racist? And the reason why this has come up is a video has gone viral this week, and this was at the Oxford Union. And there was a debate at the Oxford Union where an animal rights activist called Carol Adams said that white supremacists weaponised eating meat, eggs and dairy to reclaim their wounded masculinity. So she was sort of folding in ideas of sexism, homophobia, every ism actually sort of came into this remarkable speech. I did invite Carol onto the show, and she said she was unavailable, which is a shame because I would have genuinely liked to talk to her about this. But let's have a look at this clip of some various highlights. Have we got the clips?
The assumption that the best protein comes from corpses is a racist belief. How do you know the animal would have picked you to feed off their corpse? 21st century animal eating requires our complicity in a new colonialism. These events especially affect girls and young women. Your hamburger comes with a dose of misogyny. White supremacists weaponized it, eating meat, eggs, and dairy, and the baiting of liberal men as so-called soy boys are all part of the neo-Nazi messaging. To say you care about animals is considered a sign of weakness in a world still committed to the gender binary. Our whiteness is part of the problem of meat eating.
I mean, it is an astonishing video. I would urge you actually to watch the whole thing. You know, she's not an act. I mean, it feels like it's a bit of a skit or something. She's dead serious about this. She wrote a book called The Sexual Politics of Meat. And she believes that meat is sort of enveloped within these systems of power. But this strikes me as the logical endpoint of the kind of extreme version of intersectionality. You know, when the sort of intersectional theory was originated by Kimberly Crenshaw back in the day, it actually had a purpose. It had a meaning insofar as you know, you could have forms of oppression hitting you from more than one way. She was right, actually. And the example she gave was General Motors. There was a lawsuit with General Motors where she pointed out, so basically they were being accused of being racist and sexist. And General Motors' response was saying, well, look, we can't be racist. We have black men working for the firm. We can't be sexist. We have these women who were all white. And her point, Crenshaw's point, was that black women were falling through the cracks and they were getting hit from more than one. And that was true, right? But this has sort of developed, intersectionality sort of developed into this kind of religion, hysterical religion, where you end up with this sort of hierarchy of grievances. And all that she's doing, this Carol Adams person, is adding veganism into that chain of hierarchy. Do you think I'm over-analysing this?
No, I mean, I think eating meat can be racist, but only if you're wearing a barrister's wig. Then that's...
I was trying to make a serious point there, and Leo just scuffed.
The point that she's making, she says that eating meat is white supremacist, and if anything's white, it's veganism. It's the whitest pursuit, the whitest hobby. Like with so many, it's such a white thing to. And also, she complains about how meat eating harms indigenous communities, but there's indigenous communities that are harmed by veganism. So quinoa, that staple vegan thing, like, but the price of it is skyrocketed, and it's a staple diet in like Peru or Bolivia or somewhere like that. So the indigenous tribes there can't afford to buy their quinoa. They've all had to turn to T-bone steaks. It's been a disaster for them.
But she's claiming that it's a predominantly white, I suppose, cultural norm to eat meat. And I just don't think that's true. Is it?
Well, it is, basically. It is, because I've noticed in my many travels, that more and more of the people who eat meat
are white.
Look like me. Yeah.
But I think, Lewis, what you're saying, because I should point out, Lewis is a huge carnivore. Yeah. I mean, but you only eat meat, don't you? You've gone the full kind of sort of Jordan Peterson diet.
Yeah.
Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, just to bother people.
Is that has it actually made a difference to your health?
I mean, I'm no Leo Kurtz, but he spends all day in the gym.
Yeah, exactly. You can never reach these sort of...
Can I do some push-ups right here?
We don't... I wouldn't, because I don't want you to be embarrassed when you inevitably fail. What do you think, Leo?
Whoa.
What?
Now I have to do it.
No, well, let's do it in the break, OK? I don't want to harm your masculinity, which, again, is tied into the idea of it. But do you think there's something like that? The point... Lewis, put your shirt back on. Leo, the point I want to make about this is that is the Oxford Union, right? Now, I wanted to talk to her in all sincerity because I wanted to get to the heart of what she's talking about. But that's like the seat of learning. And I do think, ultimately, she's clearly really intelligent. She's really smart. And, you know, it's not someone who's just stupid or mad or anything like that. But my point is that you can be educated to such a degree that you can start espousing really bizarre ideas and you can believe them all the more because you're smart.
Yeah, well, my friend Nico says, you know, all this has come about because people have too much time to think. We've got too much time to sit around and think. If we all had to work 80 hours a week down a coal mine, we wouldn't have time to, like, sit around and come up with these ridiculous theories.
Well, exactly. So I think there's a lot here to talk about. Yes, Lewis, quickly, because we've got to go to break.
Is that there's something called the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is people who don't know anything think they know a lot.
Yes, exactly.
Then there's the Schaefer-Lewis effect, is people who
People who forget to finish their sentences. OK, thank you, Lewis. He almost had a punchline there. We get him on here because one day you'll deliver it successfully.
No,
That's in every review.
That's comedy genius.
It is actually. It's probably more.
No, but that's an interesting point, is that there are people who know so much who are idiots. That the more that they know, the stupider that they are.
OK, just have to... Lewis, I just have to quickly apologise if anyone was offended by the language there. You mouthed it, Lewis, so I'd just like to apologise. If any people were lip-reading that part of the show, I do apologise. Now, after the break on Free Speech Nation, we'll discuss the university that has issued its staff with a pronoun guide that says they should use terms such as cat gender. I'll explain after the break. See you in a couple of minutes.
GBNews is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for...
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. So Bristol University has caused controversy after it published a pronoun guide for staff that included the term cat gender. It said some people identify as felines, while others would use what is called emoji self pronouns. I must confess that's a new one on me. The university told staff to introduce pronoun introductions in regular conversations and meetings in order to avoid misgendering or misidentifying other people. So the pronoun guide was branded barking mad and beyond satire and embarrassing. But the university has defended its policy and said it is committed to gender inclusion. So to discuss this, I'm joined by Debbie Hayton and also by Dr. Jane Hamlin, who is the president of the Beaumont Society. Thank you both for joining me. Now, I want to come to you first, Dr. Hamlin, if you don't mind. So now, obviously, this guide contains an awful, not just the rather more eccentric, shall we say, pronoun declarations, such as cat gender. And I think the pronouns for cat gender were nya and nyan. And then there was also these emoji genders, which have since been removed, presumably because of
I was going to say, I didn't spot those. I mean, my attention was drawn to it by a journalist from the Telegraph who asked my opinion about it. But I didn't spot those. I mean, the main guidance that the university issued looked very sensible to me, but maybe not to you.
Those have been removed, Dr. Hamlin. I think the point was that those cat gender the ones that we're less familiar with were removed. But in principle, could you just talk us through why you think it's important that staff are educated in this way about the notion of gender pronouns?
Well, it's about showing respect for other people, for your colleagues, your students, the people you meet and work with. And if that's how they identify, then it's courteous, isn't it, to respect that?
Yeah, so let's just take that idea, and if I could bring you and Debbie Hayton about this, because you've written about these ideas before, and do you think it is just a matter of courtesy?
I think it's more a matter of coercion, actually, Andrew, in that people are being told what to think rather than being able to think for themselves on how they'd address somebody or refer to somebody. And that doesn't do us as transsexuals any good, because it gives the impression that we're there to not fit into society and not contribute to society, but to control society.
Dr. Hamlin, what do you think about this idea that let's just go back to the main principle of gender identity and as signified by these pronouns? Do you accept that gender identity and the notion of gender identity is something that not everyone shares? Not everyone shares that belief. And so by introducing ideas of new pronouns and multiple genders, you are in a sense bringing in a worldview that may just be specific to a minority of people.
No, well, clearly to start with it may be, but what we're trying to do is help other people to understand. I mean, not so long ago, people didn't understand why I was as I am, or Debbie either. Fortunately, things have moved considerably in the last couple of decades, and I live a very happy, very normal life. And my pronouns used to be he, him, but they're now she, her. But I was one of those people that's able to make, like Debbie, make a transition from one gender identity to another. But so many people, was discovered in a government survey in about 2016, I think, that about half of the people who identify as trans, in fact, are really non-binary. There are trans men, there are trans women, but there are lots of people in between who can't just transition from one to the other because that wouldn't be appropriate. And so they have a different identity.
So
I think we're only just beginning to realise and respect that.
I understand that point of view, and you know, I also understand that if someone transitions, they expect people to use the pronouns for the gender they transition to. So that all does make sense. And most people surely are happy to do that. So if someone used to go by the pronouns he, him, they would be happy to use she, her. But do you think that when it comes to neo-pronouns, when we're talking about pronouns such as je and je, or ver and vers, that you're asking people to take on board a change in language that hasn't come about through the natural evolution of language, that these are words that have been concocted, if you like, and then imposed. Are there any limits yourself to pronouns that you wouldn't use?
Yeah, I mean, I'm old, I'm 73, so, and I only transitioned myself, as far as the rest of the world is concerned, 10 or so years ago. So it's new for me. But I think, as I was trying to say, out of respect to other people, we should try and honour whatever it is that they favour. And if they find that helpful, helps them to solidify or confirm their own gender identity, whatever that is, then surely that's a good thing.
Debbie, can I ask you about that? Do you share that view, or do you understand the view that it is just courteous, particularly when we're talking about neo-pronouns, pronouns that such as the cat pronoun, the nya, nyan pronoun, sorry, that was incorrect, but nya and nyan. Do you think that's just a matter of courtesy, or is there something else going on?
Well, I think I said before it was coercion of language. I think if anybody is desperate for other people to use these pronouns for them, and their identity and their well-being depends upon the language of others, then they have a problem.
So, in a sense, you think that it's something for them to resolve individually and not to impose on other people. Is that what you mean?
Well, I think when it comes to transition, the biggest place to transition is inside our own heads. If we can accept ourselves for who we are, then it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks.
But then how do you feel if you're ever misgendered, if people use the pronouns you used to use?
It doesn't bother me at all. People use different pronouns for me in everyday life. Some people use she, her, other people use he, him, and it really does not bother me.
But that wouldn't be the case for everyone. I've seen people online who get very distressed when in fact, some even call the police if the pronouns are misused. What would you say to people of that kind?
Well, they do, but they're in a position where their well-being and their mental health is dependent on the language of others. It doesn't seem to me to be a great place to be. Whereas if people can use whatever pronouns they like, and people do. People will use he, him pronouns for me. Sometimes it's political. Sometimes it's people in my family who've known me a long time, and I didn't see why we should need to change those things.
Dr Hamlin, can I ask you, when it comes to the guides to pronouns, and I know that, for instance, the Scottish Civil Service have recommended to members of staff that they add pronouns to the end of their emails whenever they sign off, but a lot of them didn't want to do so. What would you make of that? Do you think that it should still be within the right of members of staff, or do you think employers have a right to say, no, you must disclose your pronouns at the end of emails or at the start of the meeting?
I think it's a shame if it's compulsory, because it just breeds resentment. And what we're, as far as I could tell, what we're trying to do is help people to understand, to be sympathetic, empathetic, and, as going back to the same old word, courteous to others. And it helps other people. If we state the pronouns we prefer, then it helps other people feel more confident when talking about us or addressing us. And again, it's going back to just courtesy. It shouldn't be compulsory, of course not, but...
well, you say of course not, but
we don't want people to resent it.
A lot of people are calling for this to be criminalised, and some people have indeed been arrested for misgendering people. So not everyone shares that view, and that I suppose is the worry that I would have about any form of speech that becomes compelled speech. I agree with you that if it's not compulsory, it's a matter of individual choice. But Debbie Hayton, could I just ask you, is it always the case, though, that this is what trans people want, that trans people want everyone to announce their pronouns before every conversation? Is that necessarily true?
Well, Jane said that it's not compulsory, but if you're in a business meeting and you sat round a table and it goes round in a circle, my name is Fred Bloggs and my pronouns are he, him, my name is this, and it gets to you, I always refuse to give pronouns at that point, because had that happened 20 years ago, when I was sat there before I transitioned, what do I do at that point? Do I out myself there on the spot and say, actually, I prefer she, her pronouns, or do I grimace and say, my name is, and my pronouns are he, him, and exacerbate the very pronouns which were distressing me at that time? I don't think anybody really thinks about people in that situation at all.
Well, I've also been in meetings where people have announced pronouns, and I can see how uncomfortable it's made a lot of people, but they just feel they have to go along with it. So, I mean, is that a risk too as well? Not that, no one so far is saying this is a compulsory thing that you have to do, but there is an element of coercion to this, that a lot of people who don't want to do it because they feel by declaring their pronouns they are subscribing to an ideology they don't support, and yet nonetheless they also feel that their career prospects, say, might be damaged if they don't play along.
Well, it's peer pressure, isn't it, around that table, and people are desperate to fit in and to be kind to people. But I don't think this is kind. And I've been there myself as well. When it's come round, it gets to me, and I said, my name is Debbie Hayton, and I prefer not to share my pronouns, and on it goes, and it drops a bit like a lead balloon in the conversation, actually. But I think it's important. But I have a little bit of extra privilege there to be able to say no to that.
Dr. Hamlin, just come to you one more time. Yes, sorry, Dr. Hamlin, you wanted to come in.
Well, they ask you. Sorry.
No, please do carry on. You wanted to come in.
Like on forms where they ask for your agenda, very usually they offer you a prefer not to say, and so I mean I would have thought that's quite reasonable.
Yes, but do you accept, for instance, just to give you a personal anecdote, an actor friend of mine who said that whenever she goes to rehearsals now for a new production, it is now the norm within that theatrical industry for everyone to announce their pronouns, and she doesn't want to do it, but she also feels that if she doesn't, she won't be cast again. Doesn't that strike you as coercive?
Well, it does, as you say it certainly does. And anything that makes people feel uncomfortable can't be right, can it? Because it doesn't need to be. You can invite people to say, use your, if you have preferred pronouns, please issue them, but to make it compulsory doesn't seem appropriate to me.
So there is some consensus here about just in terms of whether it should be compelled or not, and I think everyone's in agreement that it shouldn't be. We have to just wrap this up. So, Debbie, if I can just come to you for your final word, do you have any final thoughts on this issue?
I think we should move back to thinking about pronouns as descriptive terms and not defining terms. When people are defining themselves by pronouns, that's when we've ended up with a mess. Let's go back to describing what we see, for goodness sake.
Well, this is a fascinating conversation. Thank you both ever so much for joining me on Free Speech Nation.
My pleasure.
You're watching Free Speech Nation, and after the break, my guests Leo Kearse and Lewis Schaefer will debate whether veganism is a good thing or a bad thing. Don't go away. Very much.
On Mark Dolan tonight, in The Big Question, if Boris Johnson gets thrown out, does that risk Brexit being cancelled? My Mark Meets guest is a top US medic who has transformed the health of thousands of people with a radical and unconventional approach to better health and a slimmer waistline. Dr. Ken Berry is the author of Lies My Doctor Told Me, and he joins me at 10. And in my big opinion, the bonkers school taking meat off the menu. See you at 9.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows. Every day, we ask the questions that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. Now to the part of the show that is called Devil's Advocate. This is where our panellists will attempt to juggle a few of the hot potatoes of the day. Now, earlier, of course, we were talking about veganism, meat eating, and the social implications. And so this week, it seems apt that our big question is veganism a good thing? So firstly, arguing that it is good, Leo Kearse.
Veganism is great. I think we can all agree. I know some people are worried that, if you go vegan, there's going to be less suffering in the world. But actually, with veganism, you just move the suffering one step up the food chain to the person eating the food. So that's still there. It's great if you want to lose weight. I tried a vegan diet and I lost 7 kilos, all of it off my personality. And people also say milk isn't made for humans to grow. It's made for cows to grow. And whereas vegan food, cabbages, nuts, all designed for humans to grow. The tree producing the nut is like, I really hope this makes a human grow and doesn't germinate the seed. So that's another good reason. It's also good for climate change. It reduces the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. Ironically, that's plant food, which is bad for the vegetables. And also vegans like to drink water, which is a fish's house. But the best thing that I can say about veganism is vegan food is delicious, which is why people are always trying to get meat to look like broccoli. And you're never getting vegan food that's trying to look like meat. Oh, wait, no. Maybe that last one doesn't work.
Well, I think that's your time, Leo. So Leo Kearse, everyone. I'm going to bring in now... And you have 60 seconds, Lewis. 60 seconds to try and persuade our audience that veganism is not a good thing. Lewis Schaefer.
Well, you could tell from Leo that he's against veganism. Could you not tell with that sarcasm and irony, right? And if he's against it, how good could it be? Because he came right before and acted like he was actually a vegan and supported veganism. And there are people watching veganism, and they deserve someone to stand up for them. You, sir, are a barrister. There are vegans possibly in this audience, and there's no one here to speak for them. So it would be totally inappropriate in a debating way for me to pile it on those poor vegans.
Lewis, can I explain how the segment works? In a debate, maybe people aren't expressing their true viewpoints, but they're putting the argument forward, and you've sort of broken the spell a little bit.
No, he broke the spell.
Because you're saying that Leo wasn't sincere enough in his performance.
He wasn't sincere at all, and then he hoodwinked us by making it seem like he was going to, when in fact...
These are all the best arguments for veganism.
His diet is similar to mine.
Yes.
So you should feel bad, Andrew.
Why?
For bringing two people on this show who have the exact same point of view.
Oh, my goodness. OK, Lewis, I have to put a stop to this. So in a debate, you never did debating at school where you have to represent...
What do you think growing up Jewish is?
I mean... This is what I have to put up with. Whenever I invite him on the show, he always tries to deconstruct the rules of what we're doing, and you know,
well, we're trying to create an illusion
for the people at home.
No, but that's not an illusion because he was not supporting the vegan concept, which actually has merits of its own.
No, these are all the points. So it's supposed to be good for the environment,
which means I'm not able to debunk.
No, I just said that. I just said them.
Okay,
you basically made the vegans feel bad, and you.
No, I'm going to put a stop to this.
Listen, a vegan person would have run out of energy to argue by this point.
Are there any vegans in the audience who felt upset by that engagement? No, none. You see, none at all of them.
No, but
it was an imagined grievance that you had.
The one strength that you have a strength is that you take is that you're seemingly objective. You're caring about other people's point of view.
Yes.
You're not ramming it home.
Yes.
Okay, you failed here.
Okay. Although what I would say to that, Lewis, is that I am actually vegetarian. I don't eat meat. So really, if anyone should have been offended, it should have been me. But anyway, it doesn't matter. We're going to move on. Let's take a look at a couple of stories that have caught my eye this week. So there's this...
was I too strong in attacking you?
You're always too strong, Lewis. It's always downright offensive. That's why I bring you back.
It's my carnivore meat.
It is indeed. You eat too much meat, and that's what makes you so aggressive. So anyway, a restaurant in Surrey has been branded sexist after it published a dress code that told women to wear, quote, sexy black ankle strap heels with a form-fitting top, or bodycon dresses. I don't even know what they are. This is the Beluga Bar, which only opened a couple of days ago, and it subsequently apologised and removed the dress code from its website. However, people wrote on the restaurant's Facebook page that it was disgusting, it was sexist, it was gross. Now, look, what do you think of this, Leo? Because I kind of think, like, what I get really resentful whenever I'm told there's any kind of dress code at any kind of establishment where I'm paying, also because I've got cheap clothes, you know, I probably can't get in, but like it's like I get annoyed by that. Isn't that is a step too far, right?
I think all the people who complained, all the women who complained were probably quite tubby. There's, you know what I mean? Like, this is obviously a restaurant for, you know, we're talking Premier League footballer types. They don't want to, like, turn around and choke on their caviar because they've eyeballed some beef.
No,
unbelievably offensive.
No, you don't go there. That's where I go.
I think that's absolutely outrageous. Yeah. So I'm going to move on very quickly. Before the complaints will start flooding in, as they no doubt will. So this is an interesting one. This you might have read about this story. This is a valuable avant-garde painting that had been insured for £740,000, was vandalised. This is in Russia, by the way. It's vandalised by a bored security guard who drew eyes on faceless figures on the painting. This was on his first job, by the way, at this Russian gallery. This is a painting by Anna Leporskaya. And it was called Three Figures. And you can see there in the article in The Guardian, and it's three figures. And he drew This was painted between 1932 and 1934, by the way, so an old piece of work. And it was on display as a part of an abstract art exhibition. And the guard drew, using a ballpoint pen, those little eyes that you can just about make out in the image there. And anyway, so this has cost a lot of money. Well, he's been sacked. That's the first thing. The restoration work's going to cost over £2,000. But Lewis, do you think that he should be sacked for that, for drawing little eyes onto the painting?
Well, I mean, it just shows she didn't really put the effort in.
No, that's right. The artist had forgotten to put the eyes in. They were blank faces. Didn't make any anatomical sense, I suppose.
Yeah.
So he was just correcting a bad piece of art.
I'll tell you, when I once bought a map, and on the back of this old map, maybe 100, I used to be a nerd and liked maps, and I bought an old map, and on the back, somebody had defaced the map by drawing a ship, like just doodled an ancient, kind of a 200-year-old sailing ship.
Yes. And he'd ruined it, had he, by doing so?
No.
No?
No, it was made it kind of interesting.
Well, that's what so your argument is, I suppose, that we should enhance art. I mean, do you think that we should actually be able to go through the National Gallery and just sort of add our own detail? Actually, don't answer that question. I suspect I know what the answer is. Leo, what do you think?
Well, it really depends on who the security guard was. If he was Banksy, or as this is Russia, Banksky, like that would have meant the art was then worth £5 million. So I think art is so subjective. It doesn't have eyeballs on it, so he's put eyeballs on it. If anything, he's improved it.
OK. Philistines, at all of you. Let's get a quick question before the break. This is a question from Gabriella.
So, have you ever met a friendly farmer?
Have I ever met a friendly farmer? Well, actually, before farmers get angry about this is actually relating to a news story. There is this, apparently, there's been this thing happening where they want to stop farmers from shouting things like, "Get off my land," at trespassers. And they've been told not to use misleading signs, because apparently some farmers put signs up saying there's a bull in their field when there isn't a bull in the field. Do you think they should do that there? Do you think it's fair enough?
I mean, I don't think, when I read that article, I didn't think it was a very misleading sign. Like, there's a bull in the field. That seems to be quite a clear sign.
What if there's not a bull in the field?
Yeah, if there's not a bull in the field, then it's a load of bull. But thank you.
Do you think farmers should be more polite, Lewis?
If you was, I was just in Suffolk in a field.
I bet you were.
Yeah. And you can see how they get angry.
Of course,
it's in the middle of nowhere.
They're forever walking across their land.
Yeah, and they had like 2 Londoners walking through the land.
Yeah, but at least we're not in America where they would just shoot you.
Yeah, it's better in this. It's much better in this.
It's much better to be a trespasser.
But then again, I got run over by a bull at Mudshoot Farm with my 2 children when they were very young, and it almost killed. It could have killed me or them.
Now, I'm smiling because I don't think this is real.
No, that happens to be...
That's real, is it?
You know how you can tell it's real?
Yeah?
Not funny.
Ah.
Well, yeah, because some people have actually been killed by cows, and that's why some of these this is in the papers. So some people have been trampled, dog walkers, because the dog goes along, and which actually makes a great argument against veganism, because if you eat the cow, it can't trample any walkers.
Very interesting point. We do cover all the important stories.
And they deserve to die.
Lewis, I've told you about this before. Now, look, we've got to go to a break. Next, I'm going to be bringing you an exclusive clip from my latest podcast. That's with James Esses, who is the man who is sacked by Childline for his views on gender identity ideology. I'll see you in a minute.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows. Every day, we ask the questions that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. So in my upcoming podcast episode, I am joined by former barrister and trainee psychotherapist James Esses. He was a volunteer counsellor with Childline, but he was sacked after raising fears over the way children who are confused about their gender are rushed into changing sex. He was also kicked off his master's degree course because of his views. Here's a clip from my interview.
The very first thing that caught my eye, very literally, was one day I walked into the counselling room where we all speak to the young people, and there were posters plastered all over the walls from Stonewall saying, "Some people are trans, get over it." And that struck me as very odd, because prior to this, I had never seen any other form of ideological propaganda, I will put it, in that room. That was meant to be a space in which counsellors, I thought, could engage freely with each other, raise concerns with supervisors, and have discussions about what is in the individual interests of each young person coming through. But that, to me, was a very clear sign, actually, that open dialogue wasn't okay. So I escalated it up to senior management. I raised some of my concerns in terms of things that I had heard in training, concerns I had with Childline's own webpage. They have a webpage on gender identity, and if you read it, it reads as more of a roadmap towards transitioning for young people. So that I had quite a few concerns with that. And at the start, they seemed willing to engage with me, and I had a number of conversations, and they said that they would take my feedback on board. Ultimately, they didn't. In fact, they ignored every single piece of feedback I put forward to them. But as my name became more and more well-known in this area, particularly on social media, and I'm sure we'll come on to that in a bit, they basically said that they had had enough and that they weren't prepared for me to be speaking out about my concerns in a public forum and also be a Childline counsellor. And so one day out of the blue, over a Zoom call, I was told that I wasn't to come in for my next counselling shift.
And is that because they'd misinterpreted your concerns? I mean, you mentioned the posters by Stonewall that said some people are trans, get over it. In of itself, that's not that controversial. There are people who are trans. There are people who identify as a different gender. There are people who are gender dysphoric and go through surgical procedures to try and resolve that difficulty. So that statement in of itself is not all that controversial, is it?
I disagree. I think for two reasons. The first is we have to think about who these posters were from, and it's Stonewall. And actually, when I did digging, I discovered that Stonewall had quite a lot of input into both Childline's training and also Childline's webpage on gender identity. So that slightly concerned me, given what we now know about Stonewall and the way in which they've infiltrated so many organisations. But the message on that poster, get over it, to me, that is a clear example of shutting down conversation. It's not me seeking to deny the existence of trans people or seek to deny them from proper healthcare. I mean, that's partly why I'm speaking out, because I want to provide the very best healthcare for young children with gender dysphoria. But to simply flippantly say, well, people are trans and you need to get over that, to me was a signal that conversations couldn't be held openly on this topic. And I think I was proven right in terms of what ended up happening to me.
I mean, given that those posters are up in a Childline office, is the implication to that, if a child phones up and say they're feeling as though they're in the wrong body or something of that kind, that you're meant to simply affirm and say, well, then you are?
Well, that's what I took from it. And of course, I'm still bound by confidentiality, but, you work in very close proximity to other counsellors. Also, there are always notes from previous interactions the counsellors have had with those young people. all I ever saw was a kind of an affirmation-only approach. And I obviously had to work within the counselling model of Childline, which is to be explorative and to be non-directive. So it wasn't my place to give these children advice. And also my beliefs, and we'll come on to those I'm sure in a bit, are irrelevant actually as far as this is concerned. You know, I'm there for each individual young person. But working within that model, I would do what I felt was my ethical duty, which was to explore these issues with these young people, to ask them what they meant by the term trans or gender identity, to explore experiences in their life to date that they felt may have contributed towards feeling like this. The type of thing that you would do in counselling or therapy for anyone with any presentation.
So I suppose the way that activists counter this is that they draw an equivalence between this and say and sexuality. They will say, you know, if a young person goes to an adult figure and says, "I think I might be gay," the adult figure won't say, or certainly not anymore, they won't say, "No, you're not. You need to get these filthy thoughts out of your head," which is what they would have said when I was a kid. And that's changed. And they would suggest that it's a similar thing, that a child saying, "I was born in the wrong body," if you say, well, we actually need to question that a little bit more, it's the equivalent to someone saying to a gay person, a young gay person, "No, you're not, and let's rethink this."
Yeah, which is a valid point. What that throws up is part of the issue we've had with the interweaving of sexuality and transgenderism or gender identity, and LGBT now rolls off the tongue so easily. But we have to remember that those letters basically, well, the T certainly has been forced together with the others. And that's leading us now, particularly when it comes to looking at conversion therapy legislation the government wishes to pass, to cause all sorts of difficulties for us. But we need to distinguish between sexuality and gender identity. Scientifically, there's no evidence to suggest that people can be born in the wrong body. And we need to remember that in this country, certainly, in order to legally or medically transition, as it were, you need to be diagnosed with gender dysphoria, which is a mental health condition. So we're talking about two very different things here.
So, but this idea of being born in the wrong body, I mean, I've seen groups, trans activist groups such as Mermaids, roll back on that and say we no longer believe that you can be, or they've even suggested, I think, that they never suggested that you could be, although I think that's incorrect. So is the debate moving forward in that sense? Are more and more people recognizing that it's not possible to be born in the wrong body because you are your body?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, we could get into kind of postmodernist critique of this, whether they've rowed back from being born in the wrong body and just saying it's how I feel, that the pathways and the outcomes are much the same. But if anything, I find that Mermaids and others are actually regressing in terms of what they're stating, regressing back to old stereotypes that I thought we had eradicated. I've come across teaching materials for primary school students recently suggesting to young boys that if they like dresses in the colour pink, or young girls who like the colour blue in football, that rather than just being a more masculine girl or more feminine boy, they may actually be transgender. I thought the idea of being progressive in society was doing away with stereotypes, whereas we seem to be going back to those days again.
So a lot of activists will deny that that's happening. And it's very interesting to me because Helen Joyce mentions in her book, Trans, she mentions some leaked materials from a mermaid training session in which there was a spectrum of sex put on the or at least, sorry, a spectrum of gender put on the board. And it was identified as G.I. Joe at one end and Barbie on the other, right? So that's a very old-fashioned, almost 1950s kind of view of what it means to be a boy and what it means to be a girl. So it is true that they are peddling outdated stereotypes about gender, and that this will ultimately harm gender non-conforming children, like I was. You know, I didn't play football. I didn't like the things that the boys liked. I preferred hanging out with the girls. So that it actually reinscribes something that we thought we'd left behind a long time ago.
Completely. I mean, we can bring in the idea of non-binary here because I think it's relevant. If we think about it, we're all a combination of masculine and feminine traits born out of things that are innate within us, our family, our culture, society, and all the rest of it. You know, on that definition, all of us are a bit non-binary. But it's the truth, because there isn't this kind of polarized idea of what a man or a woman is, unless you seemingly are a trans activist or work in Mermaids. So, for example, for my sins, I listen regularly to the Mermaids podcast that they put out, which is for young people. And one of the hosts identifies as non-binary, and they had a question into the podcast as to how they knew that they were non-binary. And the response was along the lines of, well, I didn't feel like Shania Twain in her song, Man, I Feel Like a Woman, but I also didn't feel like a man. And she says it really gruffly.
With an aggressive, gruff voice. Right?
And I was, on those definitions, who are any of us? We're all a mixture of attributes and traits, and we always have been.
Well, the identification of non-binary strikes me as based and grounded in a very conservative view of what gender is. To identify as non-binary, you're saying you don't feel male or female. But of course, in order to not feel male or female, you have to have an idea of what male and female is, and you have to have a pretty rigid idea of what male and female are. And invariably, those are tied to sex stereotypes, aren't they?
That's exactly right. And that's the point that we're continuing to make. We're trying to encourage this idea that people can be as they want to be, and people can express themselves as they want to express themselves. But when we're talking about young children, we're talking about potentially irreversible medication or surgery. The stakes are far too high for us to simply go along with this and not challenge it and not question it.
That was a clip from my conversation with the former barrister and trainee psychotherapist, James Esses. And you can hear the full interview on my podcast. It's called Free Speech Nation, the podcast. It goes live right at the end of this show. That's at 9 p.m. if you're a new viewer. It is just past 8 o'clock now. You're watching Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. This is Free Speech Nation on GBNews TV and on digital radio. My guests this evening are the wonderful Leo Kearse and Lewis Schaefer, everyone.
Yeah.
Now, let's get some more questions from our audience. Now, this is from Evi. Evi.
Hello.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you.
What is your question?
Do you know any young adults who are not LGBTQ?
Do I know any young adults who are not LGBTQ? Well, no, this isn't as ridiculous as it sounds. So this is in reference to a study that came out this week that claims that 39% of Americans aged between 18 and 24 now identify as LGBTQ. Now, this is interesting to me. So I kind of feel like with all the proliferation of sort of new sexualities, new identities, etc., isn't it just like LGBTQ? Isn't it mostly straight now, basically?
Yeah.
Straight with the kind of need to be, I don't know, go on.
Well, we've seen this trend in comedy. There's all these comedians who come out, they do these big, long social media posts about how they're queer. But then they say, there's always a thing in there that they say they haven't had any same-sex, actual action.
No, it's very easy to be queer because you just identify.
They just want to identify. They just want to be cool. They've made it this the cool thing to be now. It's basically we've flipped the discrimination.
There's an element of it as well that strikes me as a bit of kind of like sort of buying yourself into a victim class, right? So I think like there is a history of gay people being persecuted throughout the centuries, being burnt at the stake, arrested, like also tortured, etc. That hasn't happened to people who claim to be cats. You know, that hasn't happened to cat gender people. But now cat gender people are now in that same bracket of LGBTQIA+.
Yeah.
Because the plus means anyone, basically, at this point. And I just sort of feel like I suppose it's almost saying like we are as oppressed as you.
Yeah.
No, you're not. You just think you're a cat.
And it's if you don't have a personality, it's a sort of is a cheap way of sort of pretending you've got a personality, having something to talk about yourself.
Yeah.
So instead of actually going out and achieving something or becoming an interesting person, you can just be like, look, I'm cat gender.
This is an interesting one, Lewis. I trust that you will give the opposing view here. Are you in support of cat gender people?
You know what? They're lonely. That's what this is all about. They want to be nice. I think you know what this is about. It's all about. I'm listening to the lady, and it's all about being nice. And by saying you're, whatever you are, you're queer or whatever those letters are, you're basically saying I'm flexible, whatever you want. I don't want to hurt your feelings.
Well, maybe. Look, and by the way, when Dr. Hamlin was talking about courtesy, I'm all for that. I don't see if someone, and quite genuinely, if someone wants to identify as a cat, call themselves cat gender. I'm fine. It's nothing to do with me. I really do believe that.
Yeah.
But I think if they say you must use my pronouns, which
Obviously,
are nyan nyan,
obviously.
I think, well, I'm not going to imitate a cat for you.
But this is where they're saying that everybody is saying they're LGBT, right? Everybody's saying
exactly.
it. The fact is, here's the underlying scary thing, is that nobody's getting laid.
No one's okay. I think you are allowed to say that.
Okay, am I allowed to say
yes,
that?
I think
I
that
can't
you
be
can't.
sure. People
You can tell with Lewis there, he was really worried about breaching Ofcom rules.
Yeah,
as
I
usual.
can use that word. Nobody,
yes, you can use that word.
People aren't hooking up today.
Okay.
So that a lot of men are thinking, you know what? You know,
It's identify as something more flexible.
and you know what? Maybe he is more. Maybe it is. I'm finding myself attracted to you.
No, but that's not, Lewis. That's not to do with identity. That's to do with my natural charisma.
Yeah. Well. So if I can find love in you, I could find someone with charisma. Sorry.
But you see, no, you're not in a victim category, though, are you? Because you are heterosexual. So you know, would you want to identify into this classification of LGBT?
How do you know I'm not in a victim category?
Well, I mean, you just seem.
I think that's really presumptuous of you.
Okay, Lewis.
To believe that.
What is your victim category?
Well, have you been to family court ever as a man? You'll know what a victim category is. The woman's applauding because that's the second wife. That's the trophy wife. That's not the one who broke the guy's heart and stopped him from seeing the kids. That's the new one.
Leo,
okay.
I'm going to come to you now. And do you have any reaction to this?
Well, no, I don't have any problems. I don't have any problems with family court because I'm actually a good father. I mean, I think it is. There's a point there. People aren't having as much sex as they used to because it's a very dangerous thing to do now.
That's actually statistically true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's actually completely true.
And there's an abundance. Speaking on first men, is that men are not getting laid.
Having sexual intercourse.
They're not. Like, under the age of 30, if I can make up a number, I'll make up a number. Maybe like 50% have never had, there's like a huge number.
That's completely true. The age that people are losing their virginity is going up and up and up, and there are more people abstaining.
And people just want to cuddle, they want to hug, and after a while, you know, it's like you look in the guy's eyes and you find the love that you need.
Exactly, and it doesn't matter what gender you are.
Right, exactly.
And by the way, what better way to get a hug than be a cat? Because that's what cats do.
Yeah.
That's all that they're always about.
And then women, speaking for women have an abundance of choice. So there's that choice thing where you have too much choice and you can't make a decision. I think that women aren't getting laid.
Lewis, I think you are perfectly placed to speak on behalf of all women. I think you are the absolute. That's why we have you on the show. I think that's absolutely right. Let's get another question now. This is from it's on a similar theme. It's from Alex. Where is Alex? Hi, Alex. What's your question?
Should local councils be spending money painting flags on the roads?
Now I saw this. I don't know how many of you saw this week. So Cardiff Council, they decided to celebrate LGBT plus History Month by painting what they said were progressive, what they're called pride flags, progressive pride flags on Castle Street in the city centre. You can see them there in the image. I don't know if we got any close-ups of them, but that's what they look like, the big ugly flag that they've now got, and they've painted it. But what's quite confusing about this is they were doing that recently as pedestrian crossings. So they were replacing the zebra crossings with these sort of rainbow-coloured pride flags, and it was confusing the hell out of the guide dogs. Because they can't, I'm not joking. The guide dogs can't cross these multiple colours. Because
they're not gay.
Exactly. No, it's because they're homophobic. That's the reason. But
either way works.
They can't see it because they can see the black and white stripes, but they can't see. And apparently they think there's like a hole in the ground or something. So it really freaks out the guide dogs.
Yeah.
But in this case, it's interesting because Cardiff, this isn't a pedestrian crossing.
No.
They're just splashing this big flag on the floor.
Well, the pedestrian crossings would be very confusing to Vikings as well, who'd think they're passing into Valhalla over the Rainbow Bridge. But yeah,
it's a very literary reference.
This is something that, you know, I think it's good that the council are painting these flags on the road, because if they didn't do that, they'd only waste the money on like collecting rubbish or keeping the streets clean or something like that. And who'd want a council to do that instead of painting nonsense flags on the ground?
You know the flags are really expensive to paint.
How much?
I actually did research.
What if somebody draws an eye on them? Are they...
Then they get fined £2,000 and they lose their job. But I mean, the thing about the flag is, my objection to the flag is aesthetic, Lewis.
Yeah.
I don't like the look of the flag. I used to like the rainbow flag because I'd go to a bar and I'd see the rainbow flag. Oh, that's a safe bar, that's a gay bar, and that's all fine. But this is years ago now, when it actually there was an element of.
I think you associate it with something.
I do. Don't say what it is, but I do associate it with something. But now, with the extra stripes, they put all these extra stripes and symbols, and it's just an eyesore. It's just a monstrosity, and I don't think that's homophobic of me to say that.
Well, when weren't we all taught you shouldn't step on the flag?
Absolutely. Stepping on the flag is the sign of disrespect.
It's totally so to put it on the ground. And that's not the best looking flag. I mean, I find the trans flag, for me, the colours.
You like that one?
Yeah, it's light blue.
Pastel.
It's pastel.
Nice.
It's really beautiful.
It is quite gentle. What I do notice, whenever I see the heterosexual flag, it's just plain white. It's really boring. I mean, it's like they're just saying, like, this is just really bland, you know.
No.
Quite bland. You want quite bland people?
No, it's a white flag. We give up.
You give up, exactly. Well, I think that's maybe how it should be. Anyway, we're going to get another question. This is a question from Claire. Hello, Claire.
Why are so many women not paying the TV licence fee?
Why are so many women not paying the TV licence fee? Now, it sounds like an incredibly sexist question, Claire, but you're not being sexist. This is actually a story that broke this week. Apparently, more than 3/4 of those convicted of not paying the licence fee are women. This is an incredible statistic. I don't know where this has come from. So a mother from Essex threatened a judicial review, but that is on hold after the BBC said that they would look into the imbalance. Lewis, what's going on here? What do you think? What on earth is happening?
Well, women want something for nothing.
I mean, weren't you just saying that you were the representative of women? You were here to be the spokesperson.
I am. I'm spokesperson. Well, everybody wants something for nothing.
I don't believe your thesis that women are just inherently more likely to indulge in criminality.
I don't see. First of all, I don't see them like hunting down women more than men and saying, "Oh, he's a guy. We'll let him off the hook."
No. It's no.
Yeah.
I'm not denying the statistics, but why would it be that? I mean, it doesn't make sense. Why?
You won't allow me. You said I shouldn't speak for women. I'm going to tell you why it's women don't want to pay it.
No, you can say whatever you want, Lewis.
No, I can't, because you'll say, no, you can't say that. I think it's something. It's like tomorrow is Valentine's Day, which is after the patron saint of giving women stuff. It's all about women. Well, I'm saying it to women, okay? They want stuff for free.
Okay, well, I think for a more...
We know as men, men want stuff for free too, but we know we're not going to get it. That's the difference. No, we know nobody's going to give it to us.
I think just for the sake of balance, let's get a more feminist perspective from Leo, Leo Kearse, who is known for his feminist credentials.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is because women are too chicken to do proper crimes like breaking into a house or punching a cow. So they do these crimes that are not paying your TV licence, which is barely even a crime. In fact, I think didn't the government make it like it's not a crime anymore? You can actually not do it. So if you're charitably donating 150 quid to the BBC every year, you're crazy. So yeah, and the BBC, they're obviously going after the weaker targets, the people who are going to get scared, because the BBC are evil, and you heard that in GB News.
No, well, you didn't hear it from GB News. You heard it from a guest on GB News, and that is a very important...
Who hasn't paid his TV licence in 15 years. 15 years ago. 15 years ago, the TV licence guy came to my door and he said, you don't have a TV licence. And I answered the door, I was hungover and I was just wearing boxer shorts. And I was like, no, come in. I just use it for playing PlayStation. Come in and I'll show you. And he was like, no, it's all right. I'll just put on the form that you don't use a TV. So that's how you get out of paying your TV licence.
Just answer the door in your box. Unbelievable. I hope the police drag you away for that.
Aren't you concerned about him saying this? This is the kind of thing that could get this, No,
because I didn't break the law. And if Leo does get dragged away and put in prison for that would be hilarious.
I mean, in fairness, it's not the worst thing the BBC have done.
OK, before we go on with this BBC bashing, because that's not what this is about, we're going to go to a break now. And after the break on Free Speech Nation, we're going to be discussing one of the big sports stories of the week. This is as Tottenham asks their supporters to stop using the Y word. So we'll see you in a couple of minutes.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows. Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. Tottenham Hotspur Football Club have asked their fans to stop using the Y word. Now, for many years, Spurs supporters have faced anti-Semitic abuse from rival fans, and in response, a large section of Tottenham fans have used the Y word to describe themselves, reclaiming it in an attempt to reclaim the word. So, comedian David Baddiel, for instance, has campaigned for Spurs supporters not to use the word for a number of years. And a survey of Tottenham fans found the overwhelming majority feel uncomfortable with its use. In a statement, Spurs said they believe it is time to move on from associating the term with the club. So to discuss this issue, I have with me Tottenham fan Mark Trainis in the studio, and I'm also joined by Stephen Pollard, who is the editor-at-large of the Jewish Chronicle, and he's also a Tottenham supporter. Thank you both. So, Mark, I'm going to come to you first. Now, you're a fan, you're a Tottenham fan. Now, the reason why I want to come to you first is because I'm interested. I know that a lot of fans from the club who are Jewish like to use the word to describe themselves. As I said in the intro there, they like to reclaim the word. So do you think they're right to have that attitude?
I'm a Jew. I've been a season ticket holder at Tottenham for over 40 years. Mm-hmm. I don't chant the word myself, but I'm not offended by it. And I do understand the use of it in the context of the fans.
Yes.
I also understand the club's standpoint on this. We're in 2022, and it's time we moved on. I'm a little on the fence on this, to be honest.
Well, so for instance, like the way that gay people reclaim the word queer, and when a gay person says that word, it has a completely different connotation than when a straight person might say it, potentially. So do you understand that maybe part of the concern is, well, there'll be non-Jewish people doing the same chants, right?
Correct. Absolutely correct.
Does that trouble you at all?
It doesn't. I've got to be honest. It really doesn't. And, I mean, I go to football with my two children. Well, they're not children. They're 18 and 19 now. They've both had formal Jewish education, primary school, secondary school, and they both chant the word. I don't get offended by it. I don't join in with the chant. It's really as simple as that.
OK, Stephen Pollard, if I could bring you in on this issue. Where do you stand on this? Because Mark's just been explaining that he doesn't feel that it's particularly offensive and that he feels that it's about a matter of personal choice. Do you see the merit in that point of view?
I've changed my mind in the last 3 or 4 years. I used to be very firmly in the camp that chanted it proudly. For all the reasons that you've outlined, I was very clear about that. And my view was if other people have a problem with it, it's their problem, not mine. But I've changed my mind. The fact is that we can't exist as Spurs fans in a bubble. If you were just talking about the relationship between the Spurs fans chanting the Y word and those at whom it's chanted, I'd have no problem with it whatsoever. But the problem is anti-Semitism in society in the last few years has been rising, incredibly alarming rates. And anti-Semitism in football on the terraces is also rising. And it's making it, the evidence is overwhelming that by us using that word, it's making it more difficult for other clubs to deal with the problem. Chelsea, for instance, which is it's probably amongst all the Premier League clubs doing the best work in terms of trying to tackle anti-Semitism amongst its own fans. still has a terrible problem where, you know, Spurs fans go and some of the Chelsea fans hiss to echo the sound of the gas chambers and so on. And by us using that word, it allows them, it sort of gives license to those people. And I think we can't exist in a vacuum. The fact is, you know, only last week, the anti-Semitism figures published by the Community Security Trust showed them at record levels. It's not Spurs fans' fault. It's not the fault of us for using the Y word. But I think, you know, we can't pretend that we're the only people around whom this debate is focused, as it were.
So the problem here is all about context, really. You're kind of implicitly acknowledging that a lot of the people who use the word are not being anti-Semitic when they use the word.
Yeah.
But your fear is that it can be used in that way. Have I got that right?
Yeah. Absolutely right. They're not being anti-Semitic. I mean, I was doing it myself, and in fact, I felt it as an almost, you know, it's a welcoming use of the word. You know, the fact some people have said in the debate in the last few days that, you know, the problem is that it was a lot of non-Jews saying it at Spurs. To me, that was the point. It was all the better that there were non-Jews chanting that word at the same time. And, you know, they weren't chanting it anti-Semitically, and it wasn't being received anti-Semitically by the players or by people at whom it was chanted. So it's not that it was being used in Spurs, the context of Spurs anti-Semitically, but outside the Spurs ground, there's almost no other context in which that word is used other than anti-Semitically. There are, you know, I've as a Jew, I've walked down the streets and had people yell "Oi!" the Y word at me, and they don't mean it in a welcoming way. They mean it in terms of in an entirely anti-Semitic way. And you know, the fact is that by us pretending at Spurs that it's all cuddly and nice, actually it's not, and it has an impact beyond the Spurs stadium.
Can I bring you in here, Mark? What do you make of Stephen's point of view there, that actually it's the kind of word that cannot really be controlled? It's all very well saying that, well, when you use it, you're obviously not being anti-Semitic. When other fans who may not even be Jewish use it, they may not be being anti-Semitic. But there is a significant contingent of people who are and will use this as a kind of disguise, I suppose.
Stephen makes a very good point, and I'm not going to disagree with the point he made. The issue I have is if all the Spurs fans stop chanting that word, is it going to stop the anti-Semitic abuse that Spurs fans generally get from fans of other clubs? As Stephen mentioned, Chelsea, West Ham have been just as bad. I've been to probably over 2,000 games, home and away, for many, many years. We've had abuse hurled at us. They wouldn't know that I was Jewish, but the abuse is hurled at Spurs fans because of the use of the Y word. So I do get that aspect, if you stop using it, and etc. But as I said, is that abuse going to stop?
Well, this is an interesting question because I know literally nothing about football. I've been to one football match and it wasn't a particularly good one, and I didn't really understand what was going on. So, but from what I understand, there was a lot of shouting, though, and there was a lot of stuff that I think, as an outsider, I would interpret as being aggressive, but I was assured it wasn't, that actually part of the culture of football on the terraces is to give the impression of saying sometimes the most vicious things, but it's all theatre. Is that just an excuse, or is that...
It's tribal. It's the best word to describe it. It's tribal. It's always been tribal.
But is that authentic, or is it a performative form of tribalism? Do you think they
probably
really
the latter? Probably the latter. I don't think there may be a handful with every fan group or fan base. There's always going to be a handful. You can have 60,000 fans in a stadium, and we've had a few incidences recently of bottles and lighters and other things being thrown at players.
Yes.
That's not everyone. That's one or two mindless individuals running on the pitch. Not everyone does it. So I think to a certain extent you have to again you look at context, and you look at do they mean it in an aggressive manner? Probably not. 99% of them don't. There are those that probably do.
Well, let's bring Stephen in on that. Stephen, do you think that what Mark is saying here is accurate, that actually even if you were to have a blanket ban on the term, firstly, would that be effective? And secondly, would that stop anti-Semitic abuse?
No, of course it wouldn't stop anti-Semitic abuse. That's not the point. The point is that by doing it, we're almost preventing anti-Semitic abuse being stopped. So of itself, it won't stop the anti-Semitic abuse. We're trying to make it as unacceptable as possible. And let me give you a quick thought experiment to sort of make the point. Imagine there was a club, a notional club, who, for the same reasons that Spurs fans had adopted the Y word, had adopted the N word, and that their fans chanted the N word, and in an entirely welcoming and pleasant way. It wasn't meant in a racist way. The thing is, you can't imagine that, can you? It's inconceivable that such a thing would happen, that there would be a club that was known to chant the N word. And we need to get to a place where the Y word is regarded as being as toxic, as it were, as the N word, because in almost every circumstance, that's how it's meant. We're having this debate about the use of it by Spurs fans because it's such an exceptional circumstance that it's actually not meant anti-Semitically.
I think the comparison you make is a very interesting one, but on the other hand, there are communities of people who have reclaimed the N-word and do use it to describe themselves, and not in a racist way. So that is possible, isn't it?
But the point is that they are using it to themselves as black community. They are using it amongst themselves to reclaim it, just as there are Jews who will tell Jewish jokes that will involve the Y word, for instance, or that can refer to themselves. The point is that the word is being used because in some ways, because Spurs fans are chanting it, it's giving license to other people to use that word anti-Semitically. The point of my kind of thought experiment, as it were, was that if another club was using the N-word, it would be giving license to non-black fans, as it were, to use the N-word when they were meaning it in a racist way. You can't imagine that because it's so inconceivable.
What is the alternative, Mark? I mean, but is it really feasible to impose any kind of linguistic restrictions on fans in a football stadium? Just, like I say, from my experience, it didn't seem like the sort of place where such restrictions could possibly work.
I agree with you. Can you arrest 30,000 people for chanting the Y word? And I think that's unfortunately where we're at, is that the club want to move on. I think maybe something to do with their image. They want to sell the stadium naming rights and various other things, shiny new stadium and all the rest of it. But at the end of the day, actually stopping it and putting a ban on it, it almost seems impossible. It's just unrealistic.
Is it more likely that what we're dealing with here is a situation where perhaps people will evolve out of using the term naturally?
I think it might be a generational thing.
Stephen, last word to you quickly on that. Do you think that's possible, that this might be the way it goes?
There's a really important point. It's not being banned. The club have asked people not to use it as the result of a survey of Spurs fans who themselves have said overwhelmingly, according to this survey, that they'd rather it wasn't used. I would reject the idea of bringing the law into this and banning it. It's Spurs fans saying we shouldn't be doing this. The Spurs club saying it. And the idea is that Spurs fans will voluntarily realise that that we shouldn't be doing it. I think banning it is the wrong way. It's about education and asking people not to use it.
Well, Stephen Pollard and Mark Trainors, thank you both for joining me here today on Free Speech Nation. And after the break on Free Speech Nation, we're going to be discussing whether works of art, theatre and literature should ever be accompanied by trigger warnings. See you in a minute.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows. Every day, we ask the questions that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. Should great art ever be accompanied by a trigger warning? People who bought tickets to see Handel's Theodora at the Royal Opera House were sent an email that said it was an explicit presentation of scenes of sexual violence, harassment and exploitation and the evocation of themes of terrorism. But is that really necessary? To discuss this, I'm joined now by the journalist and author Ella Whelan, who has written about this subject this week for Spiked. Ella Whelan, everyone.
Hi.
Hello.
Nice to be here.
Now, you wrote a very interesting article about this point of view, and your argument was really that that great art is meant to trigger you in some circumstances. Can you sort of talk us through that?
Well, the funny thing about the Theodora production is that there was this great 3-star review afterwards that said, you know, opera goers are very used to gore and sex and all that kind of stuff. And actually that this production was really tame and everyone was kind of waiting for the terrorism and all that stuff to kick in.
So it raised expectations a bit too much.
So that can partly be why trigger warnings are a problem, because they make you think something's going to happen that isn't. But what I was trying to argue is that the whole way in which we interact with art, whether it's a film or a book, and by the way, you know, great art and also crap art, is that we're meant to come to it from our own kind of authentic experience. Now, people read reviews of books. People, to a certain extent, are prepped. They might, you know, see clips of it online. But that experience that we have with a work, particularly with things like painting or a great classic, has to be some kind of interaction between two forces, between you and the artist, the author, the person, you know, the composer. And I think trigger warnings just get in the way of that. Really what it is an imposition from the publisher or the curator, these people who a lot of the time don't have much talent, to come in and basically stick their oar in. And I think that there probably are a lot of artists and writers who are turning in their graves at some of the stuff that's tagged onto their great works.
So then what would you say to the argument that, well, you know, we always put warnings on films, the BBFC often say there's scenes of sexual nature, etc., as a kind of guide for parents. Would you say that that should be distinguished from the kind of warnings you're talking about?
Well, the thing about kids and adults is that, I mean, obviously we have a watershed, we have all these rules that say that we don't allow children to just wander into pornographic material or violent stuff.
Yeah.
And that's fair enough. We don't want kids to get upset. But really, trigger warnings are actually about adults, and they're mainly about university students. So the Mail on Sunday's been spending all its time sending out freedom of information requests to university and has found that, for example, at the University of Aberdeen, students were told that Julius Caesar centred around a plot on murder. Now, that's just a plot spoiler. I mean, it's, you know...
But it's not really a plot spoiler. It's something they should already know, right?
Yeah, I'm being kind of being too generous to students. I mean, there was a trigger warning on Harry Potter at one university, and I think, why are students learning about Harry Potter at university? That's, you know, that's for another rant. But there's this suggestion that trigger warnings are really just about kind of being appropriate.
Yes.
But if you are past the age of, if you are into adulthood, then what becomes appropriate for you is completely subjective. And actually, with particularly students at universities, we should be pushing the idea that that the idea of appropriate or safe or comfortable for them should be thrown out of the window, because I think some of the best experiences I ever had was when I was completely taken out of my comfort zone. And there's also a kind of an element of, if I want to be really cruel, kind of narcissism to a lot of this, because a lot of the time you hear defenders of trigger warnings say, well, it just helps me have a better experience if I know, as, you know, a rape survivor or as, you know, abuse survivor, that there's this kind of content in there. Now, we want to live in a sympathetic world, and it's probably not very nice going around feeling, you know, reliving experiences from your past that are pretty horrible. But that's not what's supposed to happen when you interact with art. You know, when you go to stand in front of Picasso's Guernica for the first time, you're not meant to necessarily, it's not meant to make you relive your own trauma. You're meant to be thinking about Franco. You're meant to be thinking about the things that happened then. And then the way in which great art works is that there's layers. Maybe your experience comes out later. Maybe, you know, I went to see Paula Rego recently, and first of all, you're looking at a kind of dog human kind of, and then you think that's disgusting, and then you take a while and you see something else. And I think that the kind of in positioning trigger warnings gives a very superficial view, because you just, for example, you know, if you go along with what some universities are doing and say, like, the Merchant of Venice trigger warning racism, anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
That's not what the Merchant of Venice is primarily about.
Yes.
And to read it in that way would be to be doing both Shakespeare and yourself a disservice.
It's an interesting perspective that you take, because, I mean, it's very easy, isn't it, to mock some of the more egregious examples of trigger warnings. I mean, if you take I think there's one at UCL on an archaeology course as a trigger warning, you may see remains or bones or dead bodies, and I would have thought that's quite an obvious thing. But there is a kind of broader question about the infantilism of this kind of stuff. Is that, you know, someone taking a course like that, someone taking a course in literature or the classics, surely must be adult enough to know that it might contain such themes and this kind of thing. But then that has to be balanced, or does it have to be balanced, with the argument that it can reignite trauma, and that all we're doing is just making these courses more inclusive?
I think we have to be really hard on this, which is that if you are, you know, once you become an adult and enter into the world, never mind the extremely safe space of a university campus, things are going to happen to you that will make you relive trauma, or that will, you know, be unpleasant. You'll see something on the street that will remind you of a past boyfriend, or, you know, anything from the superficial to the serious. Life is not a kind of walk in the park. You know, the good things about life only, and particularly the good things about art, only become apparent. The wonderful things, the sublime things, the things that make you cry with joy, are also only available to you if you understand that there is horror and terror and death. You know, some of the greatest comedies centre around terrible things. You know, we have dark humour for a reason. And it's just pretty... I think it's pretty childish to suggest that you should be allowed to walk... I don't know why you would want to walk around in a world in which people were pretending, because that's what a trigger warning is, really.
Yes.
It's a pretense.
But it does also impact on the artist's vision in some circumstances. I was talking to a guy from the Welsh Opera, and they had a production of Dead Man Walking, and the production opened with, because it's a man on death row, and the big sort of thing about it is that he's guilty, and so you have to wrestle with the idea of, do we want even guilty people to be absolved from the death penalty? But the production started with a brutal rape scene, which showed that he was guilty. It's quite a bold artistic choice. But the theatre emailed ticket goers and said, there's a graphic scene at the start, you might want to arrive 10 minutes late. And by doing that, they are effectively interrupting or disrupting what the artist or the creative mind behind that thing is trying to achieve. Maybe they wanted people to be shocked and horrified as part of the experience.
Yeah, I think that what it also does is, what you're saying is, it can twist the meaning. So I was reading this short story by Ralph Ellison last night called Jaime's Bull, and Ralph Ellison is a black American writer. And basically it centres around, not trigger warning, spoiler alert, that's in a small, but a black bum who's riding the trains, killing a white racist guy who's there to police the bums and get them off the train. And the whole nature of the interaction is, first you see that there's obvious racism, then the black guy turns around and kills the white guy. And so if you had a trigger warning saying, warning murder or warning racism, all of the subtlety of what was going on there and what picture Ellison was trying to paint of a kind of precarious life that you could do terrible things, but they might be justified in a particular context. And all the politics swimming around that would be lost to you. It would completely neutralise the very important sting when Jaime takes the knife out of his pocket and kills the bull. So I think it's sadly, I use the term in the article, sanitises, because particularly things that are meant to shock you. So at one university had a trigger warning for murder and child abuse and poverty for Dickens's Oliver Twist. And I mean, anyone who reads that and reads Nancy being abused and then murdered and, reads all of that, reads the poverty of the kids in that book and needs some kind of trigger warning to buffer them is, I think, a little bit kind of inhumane. It's like you're not really interacting with, you're not having a genuine, authentic experience. And I think we might be creating kind of little monsters who are going around not actually ever feeling pain or feeling the right thing that you're meant to feel when art reflects life towards,
Is there also the risk that it's sort of accentuating this notion that words can be dangerous? or that paintings can be dangerous, films can be dangerous, and it would just encourage this idea, encourage trauma, in fact, where it may not exist.
Well, there's that side of it, but then there's also, you know, and this is something I think a lot of free speechers, you know, like us, don't like getting into because it's kind of dangerous territory. But words can be extremely powerful. They can, even to use that word that no one wants to use, incite people into action. You know, that's why revolutionary poetry is written. That's why paintings like Guernica were produced by people who wanted to say something and inform a kind of movement in a world where things were happening. And if we start to treat words in these kind of like isolated things, so if you see something like a character like Fagin, or you see isolated the N-word, that is in itself just kind of either neutered of all power or all powerful in itself, that it has no context. I think that's the problem. You have to look at words and images in their context. What's the artist trying to say to you? Do they really want you to just be upset by using the N-word here and just in a kind of superficial way, or are they saying something broader? Just getting young people to use their minds a little bit. I think we can do a disservice to the university students to suggest that they are, you know, walking around like needing cotton wool and that they're all sort of falling apart reading stuff. Actually, most of them aren't.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of the time there's preemptive moves by university administrations who don't want to get bad press on Twitter, essentially.
Sure.
And who have ballsy enough to say to the 3 students who complain on a literature degree, "Oh, shut up," you know? And I think most students are actually there because they want to broaden their minds and are just getting on with it.
Ella Whelan, thanks very much for joining me. Now, Education Secretary Nadhim Zahawi has said schools must stop teaching activist propaganda. Ministers have been asked to probe a council over reports that teachers have been trained to teach race theories in primary schools. This is Brighton Council. Mr Zahawi has vowed to make it clear that to teachers that their job is about education, not indoctrination. The Education Secretary has said his new guidelines will make things easier for staff to know where to draw the line. To discuss this, I'm joined by Dr Alka Sehgal-Cuthbert, who is an experienced educator and author. Alka, thanks very much for joining me.
Hello, thank you. Thank you, Andrew.
Do you welcome this intervention from the Education Secretary?
Yes, I do. I do. I mean, I have to say I haven't seen the guidance, but what we've been seeing, I also work for Don't Divide Us, and we've been very much helping Adrian Hart, the man in Brighton who's done, you know, incredible work in exposing what's going on there. But actually my own experiences and, you know, having worked in education for over 30 years, really has led me to the point where I just think somebody really needs to get a grip on what's going on here. It's like there's nobody taking oversight for what I see, what is becoming clearer and clearer, just to kind of almost like an abdication to educate our children. I mean, there's nobody taking responsibility for the dreadful kind of materials that are being selected, and also for the kind of very intentional and deliberate use, not by everybody, by any means. But, you know, it is the case that there's been a certain amount of capture by people in authority in our cultural institutions who are, you know, kind of set on making schools a site for activism. You know, in medieval times, schools were places for producing priests, and now and then, you know, we had that whole period of the Enlightenment and the development of liberal democratic societies, where education had a secular liberal function to introduce the next generation to kind of best tried and tested knowledge, you know, a kind of tradition, and not to kind of oppress them, but to help them think. And to help them, you know, grow up into adults who could engage more deeply and broadly with their peers in society and with the problems of society. And now it just seems there's a real backward step to narrowing the focus of schools and education more generally, and saying, no, we've got to produce activists who are going to save the environment, or, you know, create, you know, new actively anti-racist people, or one of the other kind of versions of identity politics that motivate them. So yes, I am pleased that Nadhim Zahawi is stepping in here and bringing this problem that's been kind of growing under the radar for such a long time.
Now, of course, a lot of this has come about because of Brighton Council's anti-racist school strategy. And of course, they would say, well, they're just trying to eliminate racism, which I'm sure we would all agree was a wonderful thing. But of course, the critics are pointing out that their methodology of doing this, and they've explicitly, although the document itself doesn't say critical race theory, the counsellor behind it has said so, that actually this is more of a divisive thing and actually effectively generates more racism. What do you make of that?
It's re-racialising schools, Andrew. There's no doubt about it. I mean, it's literally re-racialising. They are very open about saying they want children to see race, children as young as 5 and 7, who normally play quite spontaneously and happily in the playground if left to their own devices. Yes, you'll get upsets. Yes, you'll get some kids that will ask embarrassing or clunky questions. But that's the role of the adults to step in and say, no, don't do that. Don't say that. That's hurtful. That's wrong. You don't sort of change the whole system and go around telling white kids they're the bearers of privilege and black kids they're the bearers of, the kind of victims of oppression, and teach. You basically, it's a training of the teachers. And so you're encouraging, in Brighton you're encouraging teachers to be telling kids that not seeing colour is at the bottom of a pyramid with lynching at the top, as if they were on some sort of sliding scale. I mean, it's an appalling thing to do.
That's a particularly interesting example because, of course, what they're saying is that the ideal of colour blindness, which, of course, doesn't mean that you don't see race, because we all see race, but that we don't treat people differently because of race. It's a metaphor, which, of course, was most beautifully captured by Martin Luther King in his most famous speech. Yeah. That, in a sense, is on a spectrum with racial violence.
Well, exactly. I mean, it beggars belief. That kind of, if you call it colourblind approach, I would call it a universal approach, because it's basically, applying a standard of equality to everybody, irrespective of their kind of local differences. That has been the kind of, a really important part of the progress that's been made in race relations. It's kind of we've had the various race discrimination acts that have made the kind of treatment that, my family had 30 years ago, much less frequent today, virtually exists. It hardly exists in that form. And it's saying that this is now morally suspect. And if you believe that, you must be morally suspect too. And given that this kind of universal or colourblind approach is probably what a lot of people believe in, you've now got a situation where schools are now being placed as changing the values of the majority of people without consent, and quite often in very sneaky ways. Brighton and Hove have not exactly been forthcoming, as you probably know, in showing people what the materials are that they're doing. But this is a terrible, terrible thing.
How have they achieved this, though? Because, I mean, from my understanding, any kind of political or ideological teaching in schools for young children is against the Education Act. And this would certainly fall into an ideological political category. I mean, the founders of critical race theory would not deny that it is a political movement. So how can it be the case that Brighton Council have reached this stage without someone saying, hold on a minute, this is against the law?
Well, I do wonder. I mean, I think... I think there are kind of two reasons. One is a kind of growth of the kind of they've been quite anti-democratic. They've been quite stealthy and sneaky in terms of the processes and procedures within local council meetings. But I think the broader, more general problem is that this is riding on the back of, like you mentioned before, an older anti-racism that was more universal, that did not divide, and that kind of could unite people in the cause of a common shared ideal, an idea of equality. It wasn't a case of dividing people and trying to kind of encourage them to get a bigger slice of the pie, which is what this is doing. So I think it's sort of, it's a combination of deliberate manipulation plus a kind of riding on the back of an older language and set of ideas, and taking advantage of most people's good nature. Most people don't want to be seen as racist. They don't like racism. Britain is not a racist country. And I think they kind of, most people aren't political. They're not going around thinking, reading the CRT stuff or necessarily, reading about educational philosophy. And they'll just think it's an extension of that being nice. really. I think that is unfortunately wrong. That is not what this is about at all, really, and it does need exposing.
Well,
so I'm glad Nadeem Zahawi is doing it.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll see where this leads. But thank you very much for joining me today, Dr. Alka Sehgal-Cuthbert. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, every week we dedicate this part of the show to the turbid waters of social media, a place where I spend far too much time. I'm going to welcome back my panel here, Leo and Lewis. We're going to have a look now at a couple of clips that have done pretty well this week, depending on how you see it, online. This is superstar Adele, who has, of course, been making the headlines after she was the first recipient to receive the new gender-neutral award at the Brits. Of course, they got rid of best female artist, best male artist, just best artist now. And let's listen to what she had to say when she won the award.
Never lose sight of why you are who you are. The reason people are into you is because of something you have in you. Don't ever let go of that, ever. Yeah, I understand why the name of this award has changed, but I really love being a woman and being a female artist. I do. And I'm really proud of us. I really, really am. Thank you so much. Thank you.
What a bigot. I just think, if you're going to stand there and say you're proud of being a woman, unbelievable. Well, you think I'm joking, but lots of people on Twitter did call her a transphobe and started edging towards this idea that she had been... Had she been transphobic, Leo?
No, she hadn't been transphobic. She just said she liked being a woman. I mean, that's, but we're in 2022, so that is now eating meat is white supremacist and saying you like being a woman is transphobic. It's ridiculous. I mean, I think when, they made this change, I think because the Brit Awards isn't as popular as it used to be, so they don't want to give 2 awards when they can just hand out 1.
Well, maybe they're short of money at the moment. Maybe that's what it is. I mean, what do you think, Lewis? But isn't there something to be said for this? Because I think, right, if you're a singer, right, why do you need a separate award based on your biological sex? I mean, I get it with sport, I get why you'd have to have different awards, but why with singing?
You don't, and I think women, like I say, they just want everything that a man has.
It always comes back to this with you, Lewis. Your rabid misogyny informs so much of your view.
And that she lost half of her money to a man, and she wants...
Well, actually, but the thing is, she won even when she was in the category with both men and women. So I don't think your theory stands up, to be honest. Adele has basically conquered the pop world, male or female. So I think all she was
or non-binary.
Or non-binary. Well, didn't the award come about because Sam Smith said that he didn't want...
Said they didn't want.
Okay, whatever. Okay, Sam...
It's like instead of...
Sorry, Sam Smith's...
It's the equivalent of telling somebody to pat their head and rub their stomach at the same time.
Look, he can identify however he wants.
No,
he can identify however he wants. I'm not going to...
They can identify however they want.
Listen, let's move on. This is an absolute minefield. The point I was trying to make there was that the award was actually developed because someone said that they wanted to be eligible for an award. So is that fair enough?
You know what? I mean, these programs are so exhausting.
Do you know why that is, Lewis? It's because we're delving into these difficult issues.
And because you haven't had any vegan food.
And you haven't had any vegan food.
I haven't had a green vegetable in
years.
Years.
Exactly. You've got to stop this meat-eating diet, and maybe you'll be a bit more, alert and attentive. Anyway, that's my thought for today.
Push-up time.
No, you're not doing the push-ups, Lewis. Right. Now, anyway, we've got to go because we're near the end of the show. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for joining me today on Free Speech Nation. Thank you particularly, of course, to my lovely panel, Lewis Schaefer and Leo Kearse. To my guests, Ella Whelan, Alka Sehgal-Cuthbert, Jane Hamlin, Debbie Hayton, Mark Trainis and Stephen Pollard. I'm sure you'll agree we had some very interesting conversations along the way. And if you want to hear more from James Esses, you can. That's on my new podcast, the new series of the podcast, which is called Free Speech Nation, the podcast. And the full interview is live now. You can access that wherever you download your podcast usually, and you can also see it on YouTube. And if you want to join us live here in the studio and be part of our wonderful audience, that's easily done. All you have to do is go to www.sroaudiences.com. That's written right there at the bottom of the screen. Do that. Come along and join in. We also have some snacks and nibbles and refreshments and wine, more crucially. So do come along to that. And stay tuned for the brilliant Mark Dolan tonight. That's on next. And don't forget that Headliners is on every night at 11 p.m. That is the late night paper preview show where comedians will talk you through the next day's top news stories. Thank you for watching Free Speech Nation. See you next week.
looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking grey and damp for many, but there could be some early brightness in the southeast. Let's take a look at the details. It'll be a cloudy start in the southwest with some outbreaks of light rain on Monday morning. A frost-free start, but feeling chilly in the breeze. Across the southeast, it should be drier, with a few brighter spells to start the day. A much wetter picture in Wales, though, where persistent rain is likely. It's been a wet few days in Wales, so there's likely to be a lot of spray on the roads. Wetter weather also extends into northwest England, with some heavy downpours in places. A gloomy and wet start is likely for the northeast, with some brisk winds towards the coast. There'll be showers in Scotland instead of persistent rain, and perhaps a few brighter spells in between. However, skies will be cloudy for many. Sunshine and showers is the picture across Belfast. Some of the showers will be heavy, so you'll want an umbrella when you head out first thing. Showers and longer spells of rain will continue across the UK on Monday, but there should be a few glimmers of sunshine too. And that's how the weather is shaping up during tomorrow morning.
On Mark Dolan tonight, in The Big Question, if Boris Johnson gets thrown out, does that risk Brexit being cancelled? My Mark Meets guest is a top US medic who has transformed the health of thousands of people with a radical and unconventional approach to better health and a slimmer waistline. Dr. Ken Berry is the author of Lies My Doctor Told Me, and he joins me at 10. And in my big opinion, the bonkers school taking meat off the menu. See you at 9.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying